The air was different tonight. Not loud, not quiet, just wrong. It was the kind of stillness that made dogs whimper, that made guards hold their breath without knowing why. Midnight had settled over Ouagadougou like a heavy curtain, thicker than the dust that blanketed the streets. Inside the presidential command room, a ceiling fan spun slow and tired, blades slicing the air with a rhythm too calm for a night this tense. No one spoke. No one dared to. Outside, the compound was lit with the usual security lights, but something in the shadows didn't feel usual. There had been whispers soft, skittering things that slithered through corridors like wind through a crack. Whispers of documents disappearing. Convoys rerouting, familiar eyes looking a second too long. Then came the message. An encrypted file slipped into the presidential network. No name, just a phrase, "Not all uniforms are loyal." Inside the room, eyes shifted toward the door. A second passed, then two. Then, like a lion entering his territory, Ibrahim Traore stepped inside. He didn't speak. He walked slowly to the center of the room, his boots silent on the tile. He scanned every man, every woman. His gaze landed on a colonel whose throat visibly tensed. Traoré raised one hand. His voice, when it came, was steady, sharp. "Close the doors." And so the doors closed. The room exhaled and the silence turned into waiting. 3 weeks earlier, the heat near the Gulf of Guinea was sticky and unrelenting. A diplomatic gathering was taking place inside a sleek, coastal, embassy air-conditioned walls, hiding the fact that politics here was never cool. Glasses clinked, hands shook, smiles were practiced. But not everyone in the room was sipping wine for the sake of diplomacy. Across the hall, one aide slipped a slim flash drive into an envelope marked only with an eagle symbol. The envelope found its way to a West African intelligence courier that night. 48 hours later, it was on Traoré's desk in Ouagadougou. Inside, coded messages complex, but not invisible. Cross, reference dates, call logs, and most damning of all, a single, hand-sketched map. The layout of the presidential palace. Not the official one, this version, highlighted blind spots in surveillance, routines of guards, and a backdoor protocol that hadn't been used since the previous regime. There were names, too. Not clear, but suggested. A journalist known for leaks, who'd recently extended his visa. A military attaché who had doubled his travel to Paris. And a civilian consultant on regional stabilization, whose name suddenly appeared in several internal procurement memos. Traoré didn't speak during the briefing. He just sat still, eyes locked on the map. He tapped once, then again, on a red-circled zone behind the West Wing. Then he said softly, "We let them believe we are blind." Around him, the air seemed to change. Not fear, not panic. Preparation. 5 days later, the sun over Ouagadougou was unforgiving. It cast long, sharp shadows beneath the National Assembly building, where rows of journalists gathered for what was announced as a press conference on regional transparency. The speaker? Minister Amadou El Diarra, one of Traoré's earliest appointees. A man once praised for his loyalty measured, articulate, respected, but today, something was off. His tie was too tight, his eyes darted too much, and when he gripped the podium, his knuckles turned white. "Given the recent climate," Diarra began, "I believe Burkina Faso must welcome international observation and technical oversight in its internal security operations." The room fell silent. It sounded harmless reasonable even, but to those trained in the language of betrayal, the meaning was unmistakable. In coded political theater, international oversight was often the soft prelude to foreign intervention, and this line, spoken so smoothly, had not come from Diarra alone. At the back of the room, an aide from the communications bureau texted 2 words. He moved. Across the city, Traoré stood before a group of schoolchildren planting trees on the palace grounds. The cameras followed his every move. He smiled. Kneeling, he helped a young girl bury a seedling into the soil. But his earphone clicked once. He stood slowly, patted the dust from his hands, and turned to his press officer. "Send it," he said. 2 hours later, a video quietly surfaced, leaked anonymously to a Pan-African news platform. No narration, no commentary, just security footage dated 2 nights ago. In the grainy clip, Diarra, in civilian clothes, exiting the rear entrance of the French Cultural Institute. He looks around nervously, gets into an unmarked car. The license plate? Registered to an NGO connected to a former intelligence liaison. Another clip, time-stamped earlier that week. Diarra in a private meeting at the Hilton Room, 407. The man across from him blurred, but not enough. It was the journalist from the earlier file, the one who'd overstayed his visa. The footage went viral in minutes, but Traoré? He did not issue a statement. He didn't need to. The public did it for him. They came with a handshake, one user wrote under the video. They left with handcuffs. By sunset, Diarra had not been seen publicly again. His office was under audit. His staff were reassigned. No trial, no press release, just silence. But silence in Traoré's Burkina Faso was never absence, it was power. In the war room, Traoré watched the video again, this time without sound. His generals stood behind him, waiting for orders. Instead, he turned off the screen and said, "One down, we wait for the rest to come forward." He didn't raise his voice, he didn't name names, but everyone understood. The lion doesn't need to roar in the jungle, he just needs to open his eyes. And this lion had just blinked. The jungle doesn't scream before it strikes, it waits. That was the spirit with which Traoré moved next. No dramatic arrests, no martial law, just quiet rearrangements. One general reassigned to logistics. A procurement officer asked to take leave. A press aide transferred to the southern region. All routine on the surface. But underneath, a trap was being woven. Traoré called it the Silence Protocol, a counterintelligence playbook reserved for high-level infiltrations. It had only one rule: give the traitors space to move. Let them feel safe. So they did. They resumed their meetings. Their messages resumed encoded, but not unreadable. The lion had pretended to sleep. Now, the prey got bold. A false leak was planted. Rumors of a reshuffle in the palace guard. A fake memo detailed an upcoming personnel change that would reduce the Western Perimeter's watch by 40%. It was leaked through a junior aide known to share whispers with the outside press. Within days, the bait worked. A courier was intercepted on the outskirts of Bobo-Dioulasso, heading for the border. Inside his satchel, a printed version of the fake memo, annotated in French with the words, "Green light?" The handwriting matched a known operative code name, Coro, ex-military, dishonorably discharged 5 years ago. He'd been hiding in plain sight as a security contractor. That night, a jungle safe house near the border was activated. It hadn't been used since the fall of the previous regime. It was Crudino cameras, no signals, no heat maps, just trees and shadows. Inside, 5 men waited, dressed like simple traders, but each had a firearm hidden beneath their tunic. They weren't soldiers, they were watchers. A 6th man arrived late, breathless, paranoid. His hands trembled as he lit a cigarette. He leaned in and whispered something about the president's blind spot and a coordinated breach. What he didn't know, the man sitting across from him was Traoré's shadow agent, and in his lapel, a pin that looked like a flag was quietly transmitting. Back at the palace, the signal pulsed once, then twice, then the feed went live. In real time, Traoré watched the betrayer sketch a map in the dirt, describing entry points, blackout timings, and who inside the palace was ready. Then came the final line. Once he's isolated, the rest will stand down. Traoré didn't blink. He looked at his aide and said, "Mark the faces. Leave them untouched." "Untouched?" the aide asked, surprised. The president nodded. "We catch the lion not by biting, but by circling him slowly until he sees no way out." By dawn, the man from the safe house was allowed to leave. He believed the meeting had gone well. He even celebrated quietly that evening in a downtown bar, buying drinks for 2 foreign journalists he'd just met. They clinked glasses, laughed. Meanwhile, on a screen inside the intelligence HQ, the entire conversation replayed frame by frame. The jungle doesn't scream. It remembers. And tonight, it was remembering every word. The invitation arrived just past midnight, printed on official stationery, sealed with the national crest, and signed falsely by a deputy minister. It requested the presence of several high-level advisors, including 2 generals and a former intelligence coordinator, at a special strategic review the next morning. The location: the West Wing Conference Hall of the Presidential Palace. What they didn't know was that the real deputy minister was out of the country, and the invitation had been crafted inside the president's private security cell. At exactly 9 a.m., the room began to fill. Leather chairs lined the table. Pitchers of water glistened with condensation. Windows were open unusual. The air was thick with dry heat and something heavier: expectation. The men walked in slowly, nodding to one another, keeping voices low. One checked his watch repeatedly. Another sat stiff, arms crossed, barely blinking. Their plan had always been simple: surround Traoré, isolate his loyalists, frame it as a security emergency, swift, public, controlled. But there was no Traoré. Not yet. Only a projector, blank screen, and silence. Then he entered. No guards, no fanfare. Just Traoré, in full uniform, walking calmly to the front of the room. He set a thin black folder on the table, opened it slowly, and looked at no one in particular. Then he spoke, evenly. "Before we begin, let me share something with you." He clicked a remote. The screen behind him came alive. Video footage, the jungle meeting, the drawn map in the dirt. A voice, clear and undeniable, saying, "Once he's isolated, the rest will stand down." Some gasped. One hand twitched toward a pocket. 2 guards appeared from behind the curtain, silent, unmoving. "No one is under arrest," Traoré said calmly. "No one moves. We watch." Next clip. Emails, bank transfers, a message in French. Assure cooperation in exchange for transition terms. The signature? One of the men in the room. His face paled instantly. Someone stood to object. Traoré raised a hand. "You came for a coup," he said. "You called it a transition. You dressed it in peace. But peace wears no masks." One of the conspirators slammed a palm on the table. "You have no right!" "Sit," Traoré said, and he did. The screen continued. Flight logs showing secret meetings. Surveillance images of foreign agents. A voice recording of a plan titled Phase 3. Remove symbol, not system. The room was ice. But Traoré remained fire contained in stone. "You thought you could arrest a lion by inviting him to dinner," he said, stepping closer to the screen. But the lion was the one setting the table. A long silence followed. Then he closed the folder. "No one will die today," he said, "because we are not them." He let the weight of that line fall. "You will return to your homes, to your desks, for now. But know this, Africa has woken up, and the jungle now sees." He turned and walked out. The guards did not move. Neither did the traitors. Not because they were detained, but because they had already been defeated. By dusk, the palace returned to its usual humpapers. Shuffled, doors opened and closed, and the marble floor of the West Wing echoed footsteps like any other day. But something had changed. The traitors did not vanish into dark cells. There were no televised confessions, no angry mobs. Instead, Traoré chose something far quieter, far sharper. That night, without ceremony, official bulletins were posted online. Not accusations, evidence. Leaked documents, redacted only enough to protect innocent staff, were uploaded to a secure government portal. Diplomatic cables, financial records, surveillance stills, not a press release in sight. Only a simple header: "The truth belongs to the people. The public didn't wait." Within hours, hashtags surged across Francophone Africa. Number "We See You Now" trended in Bamako, Dakar, even Kinshasa. In Libreville, Students painted murals of a lion prowling through a jungle made of flags Burkina Faso's at the center. Traoré didn't speak on television. He didn't tweet. His silence was louder. At the UN, when pressed for comment, his ambassador read a single line: "We do not raise our voice in rage. We raise it in reason." In the following days, something more surprising happened. Leaders across the Sahel, Niger, Mali, even distant Eritrea released statements of support. Not coordinated, not expected, just aligned. Each carried the same sentiment. Sovereignty is not a negotiation, it is breath. And in a school in Ouagadougou, a history teacher began her lesson not with a textbook, but with a quote chalked across the board. "They tried to control our land. Now they cannot even control the truth." But Traoré remained quiet. Instead, he walked the grounds of Revolution Square, where construction crews were assembling a statue not of him, but of a lion, sculpted from scrap metal, its eyes carved from obsidian, its body armored in fragments of tanks and typewriters. At its base, 3 words etched in stone: "By truth, not fear." One morning, a foreign journalist of the few allowed, inside asked him, off the record, "Why no arrests? No tribunals?" Traoré looked at the statue. Because that's what they expected. Fear, chaos, a purge. But the lion doesn't roar to prove he's king, he just walks. The journalist fell silent. Back at his residence, Traoré removed his red beret, placed it on a wooden stand, and sat by the window. He watched as the sun fell behind the hills of Kadiogo. Then he opened a small book, flipped to a blank page, and wrote one line: "They wanted the jungle blind, now the jungle has eyes." It was not meant for press, not for history books. It was a reminder to himself, and maybe one day, to others. That victory doesn't always come with fire. Sometimes, it comes with stillness and sight. The morning air over Ouagadougou was crisp, unusually so. A hush fell across Revolution Square as citizens gathered in quiet reverence. Children clutched miniature flags. Elders stood with hands clasped behind their backs. At the heart of the plaza, the lion statue now gleamed beneath the early sun, its obsidian eyes seeming to watch over the nation. No drums, no anthem. Just the silence of a people who understood that something deeper than ceremony had taken place. Traoré stood a few steps away, alone. No podium, no escort. Just him. He glanced once toward the horizon, then to the statue, and finally to the people. Then he spoke barely above a whisper, but somehow everyone heard it. "Let them write headlines. We write history." And with that, he turned and walked away. No applause followed. Just a wind that stirred the dust like a lion's breath. In that moment, Burkina Faso was no longer just a country in resistance. It was the jungle with eyes. And the lion? The lion stood.